Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea for a third day in a row has reported more than 300 new cases of COVID-19. Social distancing was raised just yesterday in the capital area, but they're looking at raising it again. The IMF says the global economic recovery is losing steam and has called on countries to remove their trade barriers for medical goods. The world, meanwhile, faces a tsunami of debt. And the foreign minister of China, Wang Yi, will be coming to Seoul next week for bilateral talks, his first visit to South Korea in almost a year. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea could be facing its third wave of COVID-19 with more than 300 cases reported for a third day in a row. And as of Friday, the total number of cases since the virus first reached Korea has surpassed 30,000. Most of the cases are in the greater Seoul area, where the government says it's looking at raising the level of social distancing again. And with a growing number of patients in critical condition, the authorities are working to secure more beds for intensive care. Kim Do-yeon reports.
As COVID-19 cases increase, it's looking like it'll be a tough winter in the fight against the virus. On Friday, South Korea confirmed 363 new cases of COVID-19. 320 of them were local transmissions. It's the first time since late August that the country has reported more than 300 local transmissions in a day. Many experts worry this is the beginning of a third wave. Amid the sharp rise in cases, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun, who also doubles as the head of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, addressed the public on Friday.
As the spread of COVID-19 has recently surged, K-quarantine is facing a crisis again. As soon as the distancing level was raised, daily cases jumped to the triple digits. On top of that, for the last 3 days, we've been seeing 300+ cases every day.
The majority of the new cases come from the capital region, with 218 local transmissions in and around Seoul. It's the first time since late August that the figure has surpassed 200. Clusters include cases from a singing room, a gym, and workplaces. If the trend continues, the government says the current measures will not be enough and tougher measures have to be considered.
If the rise in cases in the capital region continues without easing and the weekly average reaches 200, which meets the level 2 criteria, we will consider the second stage upgrade, even if that is before the 2 weeks of current measures ends.
With the fast rise in the number of patients, the ability of medical infrastructure to accommodate patients will be a key issue. As well as the total number of patients, there has been a sharp rise in the number of patients in critical condition. As of Friday, the government says there are 112 available hospital beds for intensive care. While it says it has some cushion for these patients, it'll be expanding its capacity to 200 by the end of the year. And ultimately, it aims to make up to 600 intensive care beds available. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be coming to Seoul next week for talks on bilateral and regional issues. According to the South Korean Foreign Ministry, he will be here from next Wednesday to Friday. That's November 25th to the 27th, and will be meeting with Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa. They will discuss ways for their countries to work together on tackling COVID-19 and issues on the Korean Peninsula. Also on the agenda are regional and international issues at a time when the United States is about to have a new administration. It'll be their first face-to-face meeting since the pandemic began. Wang last visited South Korea in December 2019. With all the money governments have been spending to support their people and to try and revive their economies, plus money borrowed by companies and individuals, the total amount of debt in the world by the end of this year is expected to be around $277 trillion. And still, with COVID-19 spreading faster than ever before, the economic recovery is uncertain. Choi Won-jong has this report.
The global economic recovery is slowing as the countries battle resurgence of COVID-19. The International Monetary Fund said on Thursday that nations should promptly remove trade barriers on medical goods in order to support the recovery. According to a report on the G20 economies, the global economic recovery began in June, but it is losing momentum and the crisis is likely to leave deep and unequal scars. The IMF managing director warned in a blog post that economic path ahead remains difficult, even with a medical solution. She urged countries to cooperate to ensure the fair and swift distribution of vaccines when they become available, particularly for developing countries. The COVID-19 pandemic is projected to push global debt to a record $277 trillion by the year's end. The Institute of International Finance published a report on Wednesday titled Attack of the Debt Tsunami, which also forecast that debt to global GDP ratio will reach 365%. The report cited a significant increase in the borrowing by countries, businesses, and individuals. Many governments are attempting to provide financial support for their citizens and businesses, and more firms are scrambling for extra funding as their profits dry up due to pandemic. For the US, debt is projected to hit $80 trillion in 2020, while debt in Europe has risen $1.5 trillion to $53 trillion. Among developing economies, Lebanon, China, Malaysia, and Turkey have seen the biggest increases in their non-financial sector debt ratios this year. The Institute of International Finance said uncertainty still remains over how global economy can get itself out of this situation going forward. 최원정, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market action on this Friday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon.
Well, some states in the U.S. are locking down again ahead of Thanksgiving, but still stocks were up overnight on hope, it seems, for new stimulus. What's the story in the global markets today?
Yes, the Dow Jones climbed about 0.2%, S&P added about 0.4%, and NASDAQ gained the most by rising about 0.9%. Wall Street closed in green on Thursday and recovered from early session losses as the vaccine development outweighed an uptick in the COVID infection. If you look at the economic data side, though, you're looking at 742,000 initial filing for jobless claims, which is actually well above the estimation of 710,000. And also in terms of the corporate side, the shares of Macy outperformed after department store retailer reported same-store sales decline of more than 20%, but posted earnings and revenue that topped the expectations. So clearly, economic conditions are not good, but nevertheless, a lot of the companies are doing relatively better than expected, and therefore, market seems to be remaining quite resilient. On top of that, as you said, there is a possibility of fiscal policy coming through. You know that the monetary policy is very aggressive at this point in time with M1 growth rate of 42.6% and M2 growth rate of 24% plus. And all that liquidity is actually fitting into the economic recovery. But you really need a fiscal spending in order to see the consumption pick up more than expected. And the consumption numbers are coming in at below expectation. So therefore, we need quite a bit of a boosting measure coming through from the fiscal side. So with the possibility that the ruling party and the opposition party might come together to come up with some kind of boosting measures in fiscal side, market did recover, and that is fitting into the most of the other countries today.
Well, here in Korea, the KOSDAQ with its tech stocks was strongly higher. The KOSPI was up and down all day, but closed with a bit of a gain. What was happening there?
Yes, KOSPI actually closed well above by about 0.24%, and well above 2,500 levels. As you know, the KOSPI's peak was 2,607 or so. This was in 2018. So maybe in next a few months of time, we might see the record high level of KOSPI. Also, the KOSDAQ recovered quite sharply today by 1.2%, reaching about 870. If you look at the Korean overall market, you see the foreign investors are continued net buyer of Korea, and you are seeing also a massive the foreign injection of buying in the major industry in semiconductor, so Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, Wonik IPS, etc. And also we are seeing domestically huge amount of liquidity flowing into the local equity market. customer deposit number has hit 65 trillion won, which is a record highest number that we've seen in history of Korea. All in all, liquidity condition is very good. And economic numbers are still, on the downside, but relatively better than most of the competing countries. So therefore, we think there are some more room for Kospi to rise further in the future. Of course, the level, the speed of the rise might be a slow one, but nevertheless, we think that the trend itself is in a rising trend for Korea.
Well, we're almost out of time, but as we heard just a minute ago, global debt as of last quarter rising to $272 trillion. What do you make of this debt tsunami, as it's being called?
Right. It is $277 trillion, and that translates into debt to GDP ratio of 365%, clearly the record high numbers. And for the advanced countries, debt surged to 432% of GDP in third quarter. So clearly this is a quite negative news. However, though, if you look at the debt burden, it all relates to interest rate. And the interest rate is the lowest number right now in history. And if you look into the long history of World War II, we saw that level rising to well above 350%. But at that time, global government interest rate were well above 2%. Right now is well below 1%. So therefore, even though the debt ratio is higher, interest cover is reasonably okay. So I don't think that there will be any kind of fiscal problem in the future, in a short-term future. If it comes to become a future problem, then it might be probably in year 2024 or so.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights, and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you very much.
In the first half of this month, South Korean companies got a nice boost in revenues from a nationwide retail event called the Korea Sales Festa, where shoppers got discounts on everything from new cars to electronics and cosmetics. Bae-eun-ji reports.
South Korea's largest sales event, Korea Sales Festa, has given local firms a welcome boost this November.
Retailers, including offline stores, saw an increase in sales through the Sale Festival, even though the economy was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The festival included more than 1,700 major retailers, manufacturers, and traditional markets across the country this year, twice as many as last year. Sales of tires rose by 75.5%, and electronic appliances were up by 49.5%. And auto sales also saw a huge increase. Special promotions by the 5 automakers that took part in the festival boosted spending, raising car sales in the nation by more than 30%. During the sales event, an average of more than 7,000 cars were sold each day, and around 1,000 of those were eco-friendly cars, a 155% increase on the same period last year.
With the Korea Sales Festa and the release of our new model in November, we had more than 2,000 cars being sold in a week. I have been getting a lot of calls from consumers about the event, and those who visit our dealership have been asking about it as well.
As well as domestic sales, more than 2,000 one-on-one business meetings were arranged online to help local companies find buyers overseas. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's Ministry of SMEs and Startups is aiming to help small businesses get through the pandemic by linking them up with investors through an event called ComeUp 2020. It's also helping startups overseas grow their businesses in Korea. Kim Sang-min reports.
Together, all available options and help venture companies and startups from all over the world stay afloat amid the pandemic. That is the goal of the 3-day event created by South Korea's Ministry of SMEs and Startups. ComeUp 2020 holds various programs like online conferences and competitions to help startups find investors and receive financial support.
ComeUp 2020 has 60 programs that allow us to meet the startups that are among the latest trends. The main conference is being held under the title of Meet the Future Post-Pandemic, which will largely be driven by startups.
The main conference covers various fields including virus quarantine measures, AI, biohealth, and remote working, with more than 100 experts participating. For one of the events called K-Startup Grand Challenge, 55 overseas startups competed to be one of the 30 teams that received a support package to help their business grow in South Korea. The winner, Omo Technology, which shared ideas on precision tracking technology, has received around $100,000.
So in itself is a pretty big domestic market, but it's also good entry points for the larger, greater Asian market. The reason why it serves as a good testing bed is because it has a lot of infrastructure.
The main conference will run until Saturday, but there will be more events, including online export and investment conferences and live commerce shows until November 30th. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
The Seoul Metropolitan Government has designed a book on safety for the city's non-Korean construction workers. The city calls it a silent book because it has only pictures, no words, to make sure the language barrier doesn't result in accidents. Already partly distributed to them, it's 88 pages long and it's pocket-sized, so it's easy to carry around. It has 73 guidelines on how to use dangerous equipment and materials safely, and it's available on the city's website in PDF format. More than 700 foreign workers make up about 18% of all those working at public construction sites managed by the city. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.